Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's jointly hosted webinar by myself, Samantha Manning at Searches UK. And today we're kindly joined by Stephen Ward of the CLC. Please, can I double check if everyone can hear me clearly? If you can you just sort of send me a message in the chat or the questions tab, just to let me know that you can hear clearly. Just to also let you know that if you have any questions during the webinar that you would like to ask Stephen or myself, or if you need any further information, please do let us know. We will do a Q&A session at the end of today's webinar, or if you'd like to contact myself or Stephen separately, that's absolutely not a problem at all. Our contact details will be on the last slide for this session. And also just to let you know that the webinar today will be recorded and we will be sending a copy to everybody after the session has ended. Thank you all so much for attending, but for now I'll hand over to Stephen.
Right, thank you very much, Samantha. I'm Stephen Ward. I'm Director of Strategy and External Relations at the Council for Licensed Conveyancers. And I'm about to share my screen. Hopefully you will see in a moment my slides. Let me know if you cannot. And I just need to make sure that I can see my slides. There we go. Right. So I'm going to be talking about managing risk in a changing environment. And what I'm sharing with you today is learning that we've had at the CLC during the pandemic, obviously, but generally during the past couple of years or so, things we've learned about how the changing way of delivering conveyancing is opening up new risks, closing down old ones in some ways, and how obviously the changing work patterns of the pandemic have changed the risk profile as well. And I sort of make no apology for talking about some of the lessons of remote working and the impact of the pandemic, because although we hope we're emerging from the worst of it now, I think there is a clear risk that we could move back to stricter restrictions in the future, and so we need to be ready for that and ready to go back to those ways of working if we have to. Also, of course, a lot of people want to continue working remotely, and a lot of us are going to sort of blended modes of working, so we need to be ready for that. So, there we go. It took a moment, it was a bit sticky. Here's my agenda, which is quite a long one, but it won't take as long as the agenda perhaps implies. As I mentioned, I'll be talking about remote supervision, some of the challenges of remote working, and of course, a big issue during this period has been mental health and well-being. I think that's always an issue in the legal sector, but the additional stresses of the pandemic pointed it up, and we've seen a lot of people, a lot of firms taking action there, which is very positive. Data protection, always an issue, of course, but made more challenging with remote working and new tools. Email security, part of the same thing, really. And then something that's very important in these more challenging times is business continuity planning. And I want to look at that, some of the stresses around that, and how firms should be setting themselves up with good continuity plans and some steps you can take. File storage. That's something that has emerged as an issue from our inspections of CLC firms, where we see some problems and some challenges that are probably easily put right, but that do need addressing. And finally, professional indemnity insurance. Those of you in the audience who are CLC regulated firms or SRA regulated firms will have experienced the challenges of the indemnity insurance market over the past couple of years. There's some learning there from our point of view, and there's some good news on the horizon as well. I think perhaps I'm clutching at straws, but I think so. And I think I'd also planned to talk a little bit, because this is a question that sometimes comes up, about balancing employee expectation and business need in this new environment. But that would be teaching grandmother to suck eggs. I think you all know how to run your businesses in that respect. So what I'm going to be talking about is the learning that we, the CLC, have had in this period. So just starting with, oh, and I should have said you can put questions in the chat box at any time, but as Sam said, we'll be doing a Q&A at the end of this as well, probably at the end of the whole thing rather than the end of each section. So remote supervision, we all had to move to it very quickly. And for some of us, it was a big change. For others, might have been working remotely already, less so. But the particular challenges around supervising lawyers, whether they're trainees or junior lawyers, anyone in your organization really who you rely on to deliver for you, became a different task, I think, recently. And as I say, a lot of firms moving to hybrid working or still staying completely remote in some cases means that this is a work pattern that's with us for the foreseeable future, I think. So the first big lesson, and it's one I learned myself during the early stages of lockdown, was don't just rely on email or your case management system to supervise or manage the people who are working to you, your teams. They're great tools, obviously, but they are impersonal, and a trap that I fell into because I'm a bit antisocial, a bit introverted, is that it's very comfortable for me to retreat to dealing with people on email. But people don't always respond to that very well. You also don't pick up everything that you might pick up in a conversation, whether that's on the phone or on video like this. So that was a very important bit of learning. And although your case management system probably has loads of really great data in there about what's happening, you can interrogate the transaction files and all that sort of stuff, there's nothing better than having chat. So something I did and something that's widely recommended is establishing structured daily check-ins. Daily, perhaps not always daily. You will know what is the right sort of pattern, but make sure they're built in, they're planned in. You know when they're due to happen. The people you're working with are ready for them. They're prepared because they know they're coming up. They're ready to give you all the information you might want and to talk about the things that are on your joint agenda. So I think that was really, really helpful. And as I've sort of hinted at just now, really use the technology. We've all got it now installed on our laptops and computers, and it's great. I think a lot of us get Zoom or Teams fatigue at the end of the day, so you need to know how to balance it. I've had a few days when I've been on screen from sort of 9 o'clock till 7 p.m. and I've been absolutely exhausted. So it's always got to be a blend, but you have got that blend there. You've got the old-fashioned phone call. They're quite rare these days, aren't they? But they're a great way of checking in with somebody in a warmer, more human way. Instant messenger, we find really, really useful as a way of keeping in touch with each other sort of in real time, and having that kind of quick catch up or quick check in on a particular point that happens so easily in an office, but not when you're all in your own offices. And then video, as I mentioned, that's great because you can read the person's face as well as listen to their words, which is invaluable. Setting the rules of engagement, it's a bit like having that structured daily check-in, but also, as a manager, there might be times of the day that you want to set aside to do particular pieces of work and you don't want to be disturbed. Well, it's easy to do that through your calendar if that's shared with your colleagues, which usually they are these days. That sort of thing. When are you available for drop-in calls? Somebody who's got a random question. Do you have like a surgery period in your day when you can talk to people about that? People can come to you with their problems or challenges. And again, this was something that I really had to learn as well, which was to have non-work conversations, just foster the human relationship that you have with your teams, because it just oils the wheels of work, doesn't it? So some of that is a bit, apple pie, you might think, rather than apple pie, but these are all lessons that, I've personally learned and that we've seen firms learn as well. And the firms that are working best have all done these kinds of things to make sure that their business still operates really smoothly, and that the understanding between managers and others and within teams about what's going on, what the priorities are, where the challenges are shared and understood. So really closely linked to that, of course, is mental health and well-being. And of course, for conveyancers, this has become a real issue. The whole world was challenged by being shut away in their houses, perhaps with their spouses or others. But of course, conveyancers had the extra stress of all of those people who had been helping to move when it suddenly became very difficult to achieve that. Then the stress of the stamp duty and tax holidays, and the extreme busyness, the expectations of clients and of estate agents, and the pressure that was being put on to conveyancers at all levels then was really difficult for many people to manage. And we've obviously saw a lot of focus on that, a lot of campaigns with the sort of idea of be kind, which should be the case all the time. But perhaps the stresses of this pandemic really set up why we should be kind. Well, again, we've seen some lessons from the firms that we manage, and there are some lessons as well from Law Care. Law Care is a fantastic charity that we work with and other regulators and representative bodies work with to help promote and support mental health and wellbeing in the sector, to give sort of emergency help to individuals where that's needed, but also to foster a more healthy environment in the legal sector. So here are some of the tips from stuff that we've seen CLC and that Law Care has seen as well. A really important one, and this is framed around sort of new starters, giving them a buddy that's in addition to their manager. You'll understand why it's important that somebody starting in a new job can ask perhaps what they fear are stupid questions of somebody who is not their manager, who they don't perhaps want to reveal their ignorance to, or their supposed ignorance to. Very often, they won't be stupid questions. We often say there are no stupid questions, and certainly in this industry, if you don't know, you should ask. That's true kind of everywhere, but in the law particularly. So give new starters a buddy. Perhaps even give all team members a buddy. The established team members will probably have that already, but if people look like they're feeling isolated or they're struggling, it might be a tactic to give them somebody else who can help them along. Training sessions for all. I think just because we're not in the office, just because we're not all sat together, there are great ways of delivering training, and these need not be obviously formal training sessions. Some of the best training you can receive, you probably don't even realize it is training. It's when somebody in the office has come across a particular problem, worked out a great solution for it, and just shares that with everybody. And that can be timetabled, at 10 o'clock on Monday, Susan's going to stand up and tell us how she dealt with this sort of thing. That sort of stuff is really invaluable. It helps foster that sense of teamwork, it spreads best practice and so on, and it just makes it a more coherent workplace, even though people are kind of spread all over the county or the city or wherever. Some of the firms that are regulated by the CLC have instituted all kinds of wellness services. And these could be online yoga that's available to the team, online meditation, just the opportunity to chat with somebody about anxieties, concerns, or if you're feeling lonely or isolated, that kind of thing. You shouldn't underestimate how much that can help performance of individuals and teams. Certainly something that I found valuable, and talking to lots of colleagues, we all found valuable, was that sort of the encouraged daily walk. I think it set up new habits for people, focusing on their mental well-being while working in this new pattern. So building that kind of thing in for colleagues can be really helpful, and giving them the permission to do that sort of thing. I saw another example of a manager who was aware that some of their team were very anxious working from home about doing the little things that we all do in the middle of the day, going and putting some laundry on, nipping out to do a top-up supermarket shop for 20 minutes, picking the kids up from school. Those kinds of things, where they got the sense that the team was anxious about being away from their desk in case somebody, instant messaged them or video called them. But of course, it's one of the great benefits of remote working, and that kind of thing does not, damage performance. So they made sure that they were very communicative, this manager, about the fact that they were doing that and how they were fitting in those flexibilities to their day, and that can help make people feel better as well about how they're working remotely and working differently from home. Making it possible to talk about mental health. Again, we've got a case study on our website of a CLC regulated firm that has done a huge amount of work to make the workplace a safe place where people can talk about their stresses, their anxieties, any other mental health issues they may be facing, whether very serious or less so that they can be addressed before they spiral, and that they can continue in working normally and so on, and manage those issues in a better way. So that can be done by setting up whole sessions to talk about mental health issues, setting up perhaps a chat room or something like that. Obviously, if we're in the workplace, you can put up materials about it as well, but online, it's important to make that time, perhaps if you're having team meetings or setting up a particular lunchtime chat about mental health. And again, if there are leaders in the organization or anyone in the organization who's willing to talk openly about their particular struggles and how they've overcome them or how they're still going through them and managing them, that can really change the atmosphere for people too. And we know from our own research, when we run diversity surveys of the regulated community, we ask about disabilities and mental health, and what we know is that compared to the general population, the people we regulate responding to those surveys aren't talking, even in an anonymous survey that's for the regulator, about their mental health challenges, because it's under-mentioned in comparison to the general community. So there's a real issue there about making the law a safer place to talk about mental health, and especially because it's such a stressful place to work at many times. Slightly at the sort of easier end of the spectrum to deal with is fostering team spirit. If you've got instant messenger, it's very valuable for work. But it's also valuable to keep that team spirit going. A lot of people, during the first lockdown, got sort of a bit competitive about their 10,000 steps or even more, or their running or whatever new hobby it was that they'd taken up to sort of get them through that period. And that's really helpful for fostering team spirit. And you can continue social events. I think many of us will have had sort of cocktail hours or pizza lunches online with colleagues, and you shouldn't underestimate how useful they are at bonding a team and just allowing people to let off steam, still in a work environment, and deal informally with some of the things that they might be dealing with, they might find challenging. And I mentioned Law Care. Really, I would look it up. They're a fantastic charity. They work with the whole range of the legal sector, and there's support for individuals who are going through difficult times. But as I say, there's also a great deal of information and support there for firms, for employers, for managers, about making the legal sector workplace a good one, a better one in this respect. They're about to launch at the end of this month, we're nearly there, a report called Life in the Law, which is based on a lot of research that they did with Oxford University about what are the challenges for lawyers, how do they normally respond to them, how could we make that response better, how could we deal with those challenges better, and make sure that people aren't miserable in the workplace, that they're happy and can thrive and can give their best. So look out for that. That will be published, what's on the 28th. So next week, so have a look out for that. And if you're a CLC regulated person, or if you're not, but subscribe to one of our newsletters, you'll get the information that way as well. Also check out our website. We've now got a little area on mental health and well-being, which has got some two great case studies of firms regulated by us that are doing a lot in this space, and the links out to look at and other resources, so do check that out. Right, getting into sort of a crunchier, more technical end of delivering conveyancing services, data protection. This was a risk that I think we all identified earlier on. It's been an issue for anyone who's been managing remote working before, but with so many more of us working remotely, many people using their own devices more, it's become more of an issue that we really need to have a good look at. So, and I've just done something that I can do. So, what do we have here? This, it sounds obvious, but this is one of those things you need to diarize annually just to check, or get your IT team to check annually. Yeah, are you using the most up-to-date version of your remote access solution, or really any software that you're using? Is it all in support? Have all the right security patches been applied? All that sort of thing. You know, it can seem boring, but it's really, really important. As I say, it's one of those things that's really, you know, 2 years can pass because time flies when you're busy, and you haven't checked. So it's one of those things to sort of diarize, get your IT team to diarize, and give yourself the confidence that you're as secure as you can be in that way. It's kind of an easy thing to do. This is a boring one, and you know, it's perhaps more easy to talk about than actually do a lot of times. There are lots of temptations not to give yourself a complex password, not to change it that frequently. To access the CLC's cloud systems, I have to change my password once a month, and it really annoys me. And of course, there are all those automatic checks to make sure that my password is complex enough, that it's not like an old one I've used, and all that sort of stuff. But you know, when you are dealing with the kind of personal and financial data that we as a regulator do, and that you guys do as conveyancers, it's another thing that we can't skip. We owe that to you, the regulated community. You owe it to your clients. Where it's possible, if you're using remote systems or whatever they might be, perhaps multi-factor authentication is available. So that's where, you know, you're logging in, and then the system sends a code to your phone or something like that, or sometimes you've got a dongle you have to plug in, or it generates a code automatically, that sort of stuff. You probably use it for internet banking. That might be available with some of the systems you're using, and that might be a sensible thing to think about as well, just to give yourself that extra protection, so that you know if one of your company's laptops gets left on a train, that and it's found by a fraudster, that fraudster's not going to be able to get in and start using all the email addresses of your clients, all their bank details and so on. Alongside that, and this is where we've recently tightened the net, is around accessing data that you've got in your shared drives very often, or in case management systems, wherever it is, making sure that only the people who need access to that can get access to it. So we've structured our files in such a way that access to different subfolders is on you know, the basis of one's ID in the system. So you can't get to things that you shouldn't need and that shouldn't be available to you. Of course, if you genuinely need something that's in there, you can always ask somebody with access, and that's controlling access to it, doing it as well. But generally, if it's stuff that you are not going to need access to on a day-to-day basis, it's nice. That's more convenient, more secure not to have access to it. And we'll come on to file storage as well, but obviously when you're working remotely, I think probably most of us, even I'm not printing off as much paper as I used to keep a check on stuff that I'm doing on the screen, but we all always have a little bit of paper around, and just reminding colleagues that that paper, where it contains data that's confidential, needs to be treated as carefully as they would do if it was in the office, and it needs to be secure and away from prying eyes and so on. And of course, you have to think about what can be seen or heard if you're working in a remote location. We've all done a bit of work on a laptop on a train. Is what we're doing there visible? Should it be? Should it be taken care of a bit better? If you're working in a coffee shop or so on, obviously, you shouldn't be, because the Starbucks Wi-Fi is not that secure. But think about what might be able to be seen by other people and keep it secure in different ways. But most of us are working at home, so there it's just thinking about, well, at night, is my laptop secure? If somebody breaks in, or if I leave the door open, am I risking giving access to data that shouldn't be given? And alongside that, of course, email security is closely linked to data protection and sort of remote working security as well. And a lot of these issues are well known, but I think it's good to be reminded of these, because I think we've seen examples where these protocols haven't been followed, the phones have left themselves open, and that's led to difficulties. And the fraudsters, as I always say, are extremely highly motivated. They only have to get lucky in the conveyancing sector with access to client funds a few times to be very nicely set up for a few years, and that it does motivate them to keep trying. So we can't relax, even though I think this sector's done very well in recent years at tightening the net. Fraudsters always got new ways to trick us, and so we need to be doing the best we can. The basic thing is to make sure your antivirus and anti-malware is activated and is up to date. It can be annoying. The McAfee on my phone expired a couple of weeks ago, and I had to spend a little while that day just getting it all set up again. But the peace of mind is worth it, especially if on your phone you're dealing with a lot of emails that are about people's houses and life savings. Then I think you'll understand why that's important. Same for laptops and so on. Now, there was a lot of publicity. It's still going on, but I think the high watermark was probably about 3 or 4 years ago of sort of social engineering approaches where fraudsters will contact somebody in a firm by email or by phone, pretending to be somebody else, generally very effectively, often saying that there's a very tight deadline for something to happen, and putting that person under pressure to do things that they probably wouldn't do if they weren't under pressure, or if that situation hadn't been engineered so well by the fraudster. So watch out for those. We all know the classic example. An email gets hijacked, the fraudster waits until it's time for the client to transfer money to you, or for you to transfer money to the client, and they intervene in an email chain at that point and redirect funds to their own bank account. That's the sort of classic example, but as I say, they're constantly developing new approaches, and keeping staff aware of those is a really good idea. And just going back on that, I think the National Cyber Security Centre, which I'll come into later, has got lots of great material on that can help with that. This is one that I hadn't thought of, but we should cast our mind back to Hillary Clinton, perhaps, who got into a lot of difficulty for using her personal email while she was Secretary of State in the US on official business. And indeed, in our own country, there are issues around government ministers using WhatsApp and the traceability of messages that they're sending about sort of important matters of state. This isn't quite the same thing, but where people are working from home, particularly if they're using their own devices, the temptation might be to forward work emails to a different email address, their Hotmail, their Gmail, whatever it might be. That might seem innocuous, but is the security around that address the same as the security you've got for your firm's email addresses? Do you really want some of the data that is included in the emails that go back and forth around your firm go into addresses outside of your hopefully very secure IT environment. So it's possible to block the ability to add forwarding rules or to trace where they've been set up, and that might be something to consider or ask your IT team to consider as well. And this is the other half of it, really, just make sure that people are using the corporate email solutions. They're more secure, and you're not going to get in problems around that. Of course, for some purposes, WhatsApp can be really useful, other things like that. And WhatsApp, of course, is famously encrypted end-to-end. But again, a challenge there is a different one, perhaps. Again, there is a security and confidentiality issue there, but also there is also the paper trail issue. If you're using emails or messaging systems that are outside the corporate solution, are you capturing in a transaction file everything that you should to evidence that you have done everything that you should in the right way on that transaction? So think about that as well, and that will bring us on to file storage in a moment. So I mentioned the National Cyber Security Centre. They really are a great resource. They're part of GCHQ, so they really know their stuff, and they really know all about the latest frauds and cybercrime approaches that are developing out there and that are really hitting people hard. So there's no better place to go and get advice on how to protect your business and your clients against that kind of fraud, that kind of sophisticated fraud. The CLC, we've got our own toolkit on our website, and that is actually a really good jumping off point because we pulled together a lot of resources there, including NCSC, that are useful for the firms that we regulate. And finally, and I will never stop promoting this campaign because it is just brilliant, I think, and last week was the Take 5 to Stop Fraud week. It does what it says on the tin. It encourages people to take 5 minutes to think about how they could protect themselves better against fraud, to make themselves aware of the shape that frauds might take and how to be aware of them and on the lookout for them. And they've got a huge amount of material, and it's really great, that is really useful for educating colleagues about how to protect your business and educating clients as well about how to protect themselves while they are dealing with this very high value transaction at what might be a very stressful time in their lives for all sorts of reasons, as we know. So highly recommend visiting Take 5 to Stop Fraud, getting some of those materials and starting your own mini campaign on the back of that. But also have a look at our website, our cybercrime toolkit, which will take you also give you those links to the NCSC, which is the pinnacle of advice on this sort of thing. Now, I want to take a moment as well to talk about business continuity planning. This is something that has gone up the CLC's charts, if you like, of things to be concerned about over the last 3 or 4 years, I would say. And the pandemic, perhaps, as so often, magnifies the risks that there are around this and highlights the need to address risks that come out of business continuity challenges. Now, obviously, the CLC as a regulator requires every firm it regulates to have a business continuity plan. There's two sort of bits of two limbs to business continuity. The first is what happens if our IT system goes down, or there's a bomb scare, we can't get into the building, we can't access our files, that sort of thing. The sort of short-term business continuity planning for emergency incidents, stuff like that. And actually remote working helps with all of that, of course. If we've got our files stored securely in the cloud but remotely accessible, that makes a business much more resilient. If you're not dependent on one or two locations to do your business and get your work done, that really helps. But there will be other things that could happen that you will be aware of, at the risk to your firm that you might need to address. The second limb, of course, is longer term business continuity planning. What happens if a key individual cannot work for some reason, whether that's for 1 day, 2 days, or an extended period, or perhaps forever. How do you deal with that? And what does that mean for the resilience you have to put in place in the business? We think that all firms should have reviewed their business continuity plans in light of any new working arrangements. They probably needed something in place for complete remote working during the pandemic, or whatever hybrid they had in place then. And on the assumption that most firms aren't going back to business as usual, to working exactly as they were before the pandemic, a revised business continuity plan for emergency issues in that working arrangement. So we expect them to provide that, and there's advice on our website about setting up. But also, you need to plan for sudden closure. As I say, if a key person falls under a bus, or gets long-term sick and really can't work at all, what happens to the business then? Can it continue? Did access to certain files or certain IT equipment disappear when that person wasn't able to work? What's the fail-safe for getting access to those things so that you can continue? Who's got the key to the file store? All these sorts of things need to be taken account of so that you can prepare for sudden closure or sudden changes to the way you're required to work. We saw, very unfortunately, a sole practitioner die, and there was a real struggle for the people who were left behind, a couple of people in the firm and the widow, to manage the situation, because that kind of business continuity planning hadn't been done. Everything had a sort of single point of failure, if I can put it like that, and it was very effortful at what was a very stressful and emotional time for everybody involved, to look after the best interests of clients in the way that they should do when you're struggling to get access to the files, when you're struggling to get access to the case management system, and so on. So continuity planning in that way as well. And of course, having a succession plan, whether you're a larger firm or a smaller firm. If a key person disappears from your business because they get a better job offer, hard to imagine, but if they did, what would happen there? You know, if you lost your head of legal practice or head of finance and administration, how would you manage the immediate issues around that? Or even if it was planned, how would you ensure that you have the expertise in place to get you over a period of months while you perhaps recruited a successor? What are your succession plans? If you are thinking about retiring, how are you, as a principal of a firm, going to make that happen? How are you going to backfill for yourself as you perhaps reduce your amount of working time and continue to, you know, keep the show on the road, keep the clients serviced in the way that they should be? Setting out a business continuity plan really helps with these issues, because it gives you take a bit of time to think about all the things that can happen. Think about these issues I've already mentioned, you know, who has access to the files, the bank accounts and so on, who knows the passwords that they were just talking about. You need recovery plans for all of that. Now, as is probably obvious from the kinds of things I've said, these are not going to be easy conversations with colleagues, with partners, with potential investors, purchasers of your firm, whatever it might be. But it's better to have them now, while you've got the luxury of time and you're not under pressure and you're not dealing with anxiety, grief, or whatever it might be, to prepare that route to a stable future once you get through these obstacles. And you know, also think about, if you've got partnership or shareholding agreements, they need to be sort of flexible, perhaps, or to cope with any plans that you have in place, any contingency planning you have in place. Does the partnership or shareholding agreement, can it cope with that change, or does something need to be done to make it more flexible, to future-proof it a bit? So this is a key area where we expect firms to have done work, because it's vital for client protection. It's really important when we have to deal with closures. Our first priority is to protect the clients, and that can be made very difficult if some of this work hasn't been done if the business isn't able to continue when it's under stress because of the loss of an individual or some kind of failure in some way. So another problem that we see frequently on inspection is around file storage. And this became acute when we saw some firms close down unexpectedly, and the management of files was very, very challenging because they haven't been looked after well. Now, the CLC's requirement for file storage is there. It's quite straightforward. But obviously, it does mean that you need to manage those files. It's very easy to put a group of batch of files into one of those boxes, shove it in the back of a cupboard, know that it's there, and then, you know, years and years later, you find that you're still storing it. It's taking up a lot of space. You've rented extra office space that you don't need because, you know, all of these old files are clogging the space up, or you're paying more of your storage, whatever it might be. Keeping on top of that weeding of files is a really useful exercise. It will save you money in the long run, and it will keep things neat. And when you need to find files, because perhaps a client comes back to you, or there's a complaint about something or a problem, and you need to go back and find that file, then that will be much easier when you do it. We also see problems around digital storage. Case management systems are great, and some of them do store transaction files really well, but can you export it? Is it backed up? Is it easily accessible? As I mentioned earlier on, we have seen firms where, you know, it can be difficult to say this is the transaction file and this has all the necessary information on it, because some of the information is in the case management system, some is in an email chain, some might be in an instant message system or an internet portal that's probably been put into the CMS, but nonetheless, and some can be in paper. And so, you know, the transaction file might be here, there, and everywhere, rather than in one place. So best practice, we say, is at the end of the transaction is to store all of the transaction file that you need to keep. And again, you know, you might think carefully about, well, what don't we need to keep? Let's keep what we need. Store that as a PDF. It's universally accessible. It's a durable medium that meets our requirements. And as I say, it's very easy to open and find, as long as it's labeled well and stored in a sort of structured way. This can be challenging, of course, when you're particularly busy. You know, you've got a transaction done, you've got 10 more transactions that you want to get over the line, and so on. But this is the kind of effort that that really, you know, pays off in the longer term. Now, finally, I want to say a few things about, excuse me, professional indemnity insurance. We published in early 2021, is that right? Yes, something called the Risk Agenda. That set out challenges for firms that we see through our inspection and monitoring work. And we focused, had a big focus on professional indemnity insurance because for a couple of years, all of the professions have had difficult PI renewal rounds. The PI market has hardened a lot, and insurers are taking steps to maintain the viability of their schemes, to maintain their profitability, improve their profitability. And this has led to challenges for some firms in securing PI, obviously. Now, we identified in that risk agenda some types of work that that made insurers particularly anxious and that they prefer not to see in firms. Some of these were buyer-funded developments and investment schemes, where there perhaps isn't an underlying transaction, the transfer of property, but rather, as I say, an investment. It's an investment scheme. New build developments that have been open to fraud, perhaps where there have been large deposits and the developers have run away. You know, we might think that we can spot those kinds of things, but fraudsters, as I say, are very clever and very highly motivated. So we can't let down our guard on that. Dabbling where firms are doing a little bit of work that's outside their core competence. So perhaps a conveyancing firm that's a really great conveyancing firm, but for one reason or another to meet clients' needs, they've done a little probate or some estate management or something like that. Really makes the insurers nervous. And if you're dealing with commercial conveyancing, issues around break clauses in commercial leases, whether they're properly understood, whether they're well expressed, and so on, has caused difficulty and claims in the past. So I would encourage you all to look at the risk agenda and familiarise yourselves with that, and just think about how you can make yourselves most attractive to firms. Obviously, we've done a commentary on the most recent PI renewal round for CLC firms, which was another difficult one, but many firms saw their premiums fall this year. Others saw them stay the same. Others saw them rise. And some firms, unfortunately, had to close because they couldn't secure indemnity insurance, and generally for one of the reasons that's on this slide. They had work in the past that made the insurers anxious, or claims pending that made them anxious. Now, the CLC is doing some work with insurers. We ran a call for evidence in June, July, and August in the end, looking for views on how the professional indemnity insurance scheme could be modified to maintain the same high standards of consumer protection that we do, but to ease the market if at all possible. We're now at the stage of setting up one-to-one discussions with insurers about that, and we'll come back to the profession to talk about what emerges from those discussions before we put out a formal consultation later this year, with a view to amending our rules, perhaps in time for the 2022 renewal, and hopefully making that an easier renewal round for everybody. But as I say, our guiding principle there will be the maintenance of high standards of consumer protection that we have set and that the CLC regime is known for. So that's me cantering through quite a lot of things, and now it's time for any questions. And I don't see anything in the chat, but I'll hand back to Sam. I think he's going to take over now, and yes, see whether we've got any questions.
Thank you, Stephen. So at the moment, we haven't got any questions at the moment. However, as I did say, our contact details are on this slide. So if you do have any questions that you would rather ask on a one-to-one basis, by all means, give us a call or give us an email, and we'll be more than happy to answer any questions you may have at a later stage. Or if you rewatch the webinar and think, actually, I've got a question, by all means, contact us and we'll be more than happy to help. Stephen, are you okay just to change to the next slide, please? Sorry.
I am. So there we go.
Sorry.
Can you see that now, I hope?
Oh, yes, we can now. Thank you. So I'd just like to say thank you so much to Stephen for hosting today's webinar. And we would also like to thank every single one of you for attending. We understand how incredibly busy you are at the moment, and we really appreciate you taking the time to spend time with us this morning for today's webinar. I just wanted to let you all know that HM Land Registry and Searches UK have teamed up to host a series of free nationwide seminars. The seminars will be taking place in Leeds, Birmingham, Bristol, Manchester, London and Nottingham. So if you have any queries that you'd like to raise with HM Land Registry directly, now is your opportunity. If you would like further information, or if you would like to book onto the seminars, please do go to our website, www.searchesuk.co.uk/events/categories/seminars, and you can pick which one. As I said, they are free seminars, and we'll hope to see you at one of them soon. Thank you so much once again, Stephen. It was really lovely to speak to you, and thank you for hosting. I hope you all have a lovely morning, and we'll speak soon. Take care, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.